Hi guys, so I'm preaching today from my apartment to my roommates. My audience would be a mental health facility, whether inpatient or outpatient, just like I'm preaching to people who are there getting treatment for whatever like different type of mental illness it may be. Yes, so enjoy, I suppose. I'll start whenever I start. Keep you on your toes. Maybe you'll be here for a minute. Sorry, guys. I don't know how to hold this. I can remember the first day that I couldn't get out of bed. I was 14 years old. I remember being stuck there. I kind of cycled through crying, feeling numb, feeling confused, but I just couldn't get out of bed. I just remember feeling so sad. I just did not want to move. I'm 21 now. So it's been 8 years, and since then I have been diagnosed with multiple different things, from depression to anxiety to even an eating disorder at a point. And since I'm sitting here with all of you, I know that you understand this struggle. I know you understand the pain of fighting this invisible war. I know you know the pain of not being understood, of feeling crazy, of just wanting to be normal. Mental illness brings such great pain, and it brings such a sense of hopelessness, like it's just too big to deal with. And without Jesus, our pain can feel so hopeless. So mental illness, as you guys all know, is a sickness. It's a sickness just like any other physical ailment, but a lot of times it isn't treated like that. It's treated like something so different. But it can still feel so all-encompassing. It can feel as if it's too big to handle. All of you, especially since you're here receiving treatment, I know that you crave healing. I know that you just want to feel free from this war that goes on in your head. And so today I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story about a man who can offer you that healing, who can offer you that hope, who can show you that nothing is too big for Jesus to heal. So we're going to read that story. It's in a book of the Bible called Mark. It's in the New Testament, so if any of you happen to have Bibles, feel free to flip there. We're going to Mark chapter 5, and we're going to be reading through verses 21 through 43. So I'm going to read it first, and then we're going to just kind of talk about it, all right? When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, so just kind of like a religious leader of the day, named Jairus came. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. A woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. He turned around to the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you, his disciples, or like his friends, his followers," his disciples answered. "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" So his disciples are kind of like, "You're literally in the middle of the crowd. What do you mean, who touched you? Everybody's touching you, Jesus." But when Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it, then the woman came forward, knowing what had happened to her. She came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While he was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. So these are just like kind of his closer disciples. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all outside, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders to not let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So, a lot just happened. I know it can sound super crazy what we just read, the two different stories, because it sounds like a lot of crazy and like really big miracle things took place. So we're going to kind of just walk through the story and just look at the two different stories that happened, because they kind of overlap and things can be missed. So, first, let's start with the woman. So Jesus is on the way to go see Jairus, heal his little girl, and this woman stops him on the way because she sees Jesus, and she believes that Jesus is the one who can heal me. It talks about how she has been bleeding for 12 years. That is a long time. And it talks about how she has just suffered, just trying to get better, but nothing worked. And as a woman, in this time, in the biblical time, who was bleeding, she would have been just shunned by the community. She would have been deemed unclean, just like kind of been an outcast. So not only is she just physically suffering, but emotionally too, just like not having any community, anybody who understands her. And so she sees Jesus and she's like, this is kind of my last hope. This is like the last stretch that I'm going to try. How many of you guys have ever just felt like that? Even just like take 5 seconds to think about, you just don't feel understood. You just sort of just felt like you've been suffering. And you're like, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't want to try one more thing. I just have one last hope to give and I don't know where I'm going to put it. I know I have felt like that many times in my life. And this woman feels like that. And she just believes, though, that nothing is too big for Jesus to heal. So she goes up and she touches him. And it says that immediately she was freed from her suffering. It talks about then Jesus, knowing that a woman had just been healed, kind of like looks around. He wants her to come forward. He wants her to share her victory and what has just happened. And so she does. She finally comes forward. She gets the nerve to come forward. And look what Jesus says to her. He says, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." This woman who has suffered so long is now freed from her suffering. She is freed and can go in peace because she believed that with Jesus, nothing was too big for him to heal. Now, while this is happening, Jairus' daughter is still very sick. And some of his friends come from his house and is like, "Your daughter has died. Like, let's just go kind of work on the funeral. Let's just leave Jesus alone." How many of you have felt like that? That God is just too busy. Jesus is just too busy healing other people. He's too busy fixing other people's problems. That he forgets about yours. He doesn't even notice you. He forgets that you even asked for help. I bet that's how Jairus felt. Kind of like, what the heck, Jesus? Like, I asked you for help first. And you healed her? Like, what about my little girl? What about me? But Jesus hears this and is like, don't be afraid. Just believe. Let's go. Let's go take care of your little girl now. Because Jesus knows that nothing, not even death, is too big for him to heal. So he goes to their house, and as it says, He's like, she's just sleeping. He's like, this is nothing. I can heal this. And he goes into her room and says, little girl, get up. And she does. She rises. She is healed. And they are able to rejoice in that. And so that's kind of a really quick summary of those two stories together. The way that Jesus knows that nothing is too big for him to heal. That the characters in the story, when they realize who Jesus is, that they know that nothing is too big for him to heal. So what do you think when you hear these stories? What do they mean to you? Do you feel hopeful? Do you feel angry about these stories? Do you feel something else? Because both responses are completely valid. I know that I even have felt both of them while listening to this story. I felt hopeful, knowing that Jesus can really do this. I felt angry, wondering why it hasn't looked like it did in the story for me. So I understand both responses. And I want you to know and really realize that you're feeling either hopeful or angry or maybe a mix of all in between because you want this. You want what's going on in this story. You want a Jesus-sized miracle. You want him to come into your life and heal you of your suffering. And that's why you feel so hopeful hearing this, or you feel so angry because you're like, well, why hasn't he done this for me yet? Where is he in this suffering? And I want you to remember what we learned in the story, that nothing is too big for Jesus to heal. I speak from very personal experience that the healing, especially for anything in this world, whether it's physical or mental, the healing may not always look like it did in this story. It doesn't mean it's impossible for it to be completely taken away, but it may look a little bit different. But you can still receive healing. And I'm sure you're wondering, how the heck is that even possible? Like, who is this man? This raising kids from the dead and like stopping women's bleeding? Jesus is a man. He came as fully God and fully human. And so we celebrated Easter a couple weeks ago. Easter is the symbolization of the day that Jesus rose from the grave. 3 days earlier, they crucified him on a cross. And when they crucified him and he died, he took on all our brokenness, all our pain, all our mistakes, everything. And he took it and he died. And when he died, he took all of that with it. He took all of that into death with him. And then 3 days later, being God, still man, but still fully God, he rose from the grave. And when he rose, he left all that stuff still in the grave, though. He left your brokenness and your mistakes and your pain. He left that in the grave. But because he rose again, we are able to now have a new life. We are able to receive this incredible healing and joy and light and hope with him. And so that's how all of it's possible. And I know it still sounds kind of crazy. And trust me, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out yet either. But it doesn't mean that you can't start to learn about it today and start to trust Jesus today. So if you're sitting here and you're like, I want that healing. I want you to know you can receive that today. You can begin to receive that healing today. And it might not be that your mental illness is taken away. It might not be. But it does mean that you can begin to be healed from hopelessness, from the darkness in your head, from the dark thoughts and feelings. You can be healed from feeling misunderstood because Jesus understands your pain. And one day, when you trust Jesus today, it means that when you die, only your body dies, but spiritually your soul, it lives on in heaven forever. And the last book of Revelations talks about how in heaven there is no more pain, no more tears, no more suffering. So if just this little bit on earth, you still continue to have a mental illness, for the rest of eternity in heaven, you will be healed. You will be in a perfect body. You will be in the most beautiful place in the whole world, and you will be free from your mental illness completely and totally. And that's what you can receive today when you choose, and if you choose to trust Jesus. I know it does. It sounds crazy, but I promise you it is worth it. I promise that you will never have to walk through the darkness of your head alone when you are with Jesus and when the light of Jesus shines in your life. So I'm going to pray, and if any of you kind of feel like a little tug at your heart, feel free to just silently pray along with me. If you don't know yet, that's totally okay. I'd love to talk with you after this. I would love to hear your story. I'd love to answer any questions and just just get to know you a little bit more. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you for giving me this time. And I'm just going to go ahead and pray now, okay? Dear God, thank you just for all these people here. I pray that you would just hold close everyone who suffers with a mental illness, Lord. I pray that you would just give them such hope and peace and show that you can heal them, whether on earth or fully in heaven. But even if it's just a little bit on earth, God, I pray that you would show them that you are good and that you are here with them and that you suffer with them and your heart breaks with them. Lord, I pray for everyone who's listened today. I pray that you would just flood their hearts, God, and hold them so close. I pray that they would come to know you on a very real level. In your name we pray. Amen.